I want to talk to you today about what it's like to be a professional futurist and give you a sense of how foresight is practiced inside organizations. So let's start with the big question here, which is, why do we study the future? So like Alice in Wonderland, many organizations really don't have a clue of where they want to go in the future. So I think one of the key missions of futurists is to help organizations get a better sense of where they want to go, and then to help them get there. So my personal journey as a futurist started back in the 1980s. I was standing in line. We used to do that to sign up for courses. I was on my third major. Nothing was really kind of clicking, and going through the program, History of the Future. Well, that's not, as good as anything, right? So what I found out is there's this whole world of people who are writing books about the future. There are futurists that are advising government agencies and businesses about how to plan for the future. There's this World Future Society that has 30,000 members in a magazine called The Futurists. There's a World Future Studies Federation. So there's this whole world out there, and I'm like, I'm in, right? So when it came time to think of a graduate school, I found the University of Houston's graduate program in Future Studies. It used to be down at Clear Lake. It was established in 1975. So we have the known universe's longest running graduate program in Future Studies. And what they teach you there, so the kinds of things that we learned was how to do scenario planning, technology forecasting, trend analysis, systems thinking, social change, visioning, planning. So these are all course titles. I mean, I'm like, this is too good to be true, right? This is too much fun. So it was a great master's degree. I went through that. And then, of course, it's time to get a job. And I found an internship with Joe Coates, one of the great futurists up in Washington, D.C. He had one of about a dozen companies, consulting companies, that exclusively studied the future. That's all they did, right? We called ourselves a think tank because we did fun projects and didn't really care about making money, and it sounded better. And we were based in his house, so half of his house was a house and the other half was the business. There were 6 of us. I was in the spare bedroom. That was my office. But we had an amazing array of projects that clients would hire us for. And our typical project was the future of. So we did the future of nuclear energy, the future of nanotechnology, the future of communications, food, basically, you name it, and we did some kind of a study on it. It was truly a remarkable 7 years working on these kinds of projects. And I wanted to show you an example of one of our projects. It was a book based on a project. So we did a 3-year project on the future of science and technology. This was back in the early 90s. And we had 18 sponsors, like Fortune-type companies, government agencies, U.S. and some global or non-U.S. companies. And their goal was to get the big picture of where science and technology is going, so that when they were making their R&D investments in the then present, they could sort of align them with the future that was emerging. And that's really, that's a key thing that we do, is we look to the future. Well, it is interesting, but not just because it's interesting, because we say, how does that change what we do today? How does that change the decisions in the present? So that the decisions we take in the present are aligned with the emerging future, right? So one of the things we did, so a couple years ago, it was the 15-year anniversary of the publication of the book. And I thought it would be interesting to go and look and see, well, how are our forecasts doing? We get asked that question all the time. Well, how accurate are you, right? So, all right, let's do that. But before I sort of go into that, I want to make another key point of what futurists do. We don't predict the future. It's impossible. Too many factors, right? Impossible to get it right. But what we can do is we can sort of map out a range of plausible scenarios. Right? We can do that, and then we can identify the indicators or the guideposts that tell us, are we heading towards scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3? So, we kind of map out the possibilities, and then keep our eyes on how it's unfolding, taking the guesswork out of it. But that said, occasionally we do get asked, give us your best guess, right? And so in chapter 2 of the book, we had 107 forecasts about the year 2025. So I enlisted some of my professional colleagues and myself, and we looked at those forecasts and, how are we doing? So it turns out that like 2 out of 3 seem to be like pretty well on track. Like, all right, not bad. We're reasonably close. And so for the ones we missed, there were 2 major errors. One in the area of information and communications technology. Where do you think we were there? Too optimistic or too pessimistic? Yeah, you're right. We were like things are happening that we thought were 2025 are already happening now. So we missed how fast information communication would develop, and the other one was biotechnology and genetics. And in those developments seemed to be a lot slower than we had thought. We basically thought we had it all figured out by now. So those were the 2 major errors that we made in that project, but not bad. 2 out of 3, and some other colleagues who've looked at that have come to similar numbers. So anyway, that experience was great, but one of the things that bugged me the most about my time there was a lot of our clients would come to us and they'd say, we love your work, but we have a real hard time getting it through the organization. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if, kind of like when you want to study prison culture, you pose as a prisoner, you go inside. I'm like, why don't I go inside a company? Now, I did tell them what I was doing, but I was kind of like, I wanted to go inside and experience those challenges firsthand. Like, why is it so hard to get future thinking into organizations? So there's a couple things, all right, being sort of realistic about it. One, most people don't think about the future, challenge number 1. And number 2, it usually involves significant change, and most of us, now not the people who are here, but most of us don't like change. We'd rather keep things the same. So those are 2 pretty big challenges. So I thought, all right, first thing I got to do is understand my audience. What's the reception going to be like when I come in with this? Let's think about the future and let's change message. So 2 dimensions. So imagine this is the internal audience. Some people will get the foresight message. Some people won't get it. Some people are very pragmatic about how they operate, and other people have pretty firm views. It creates these 4 segments. The frogs. They understand foresight, and they're pretty good at getting things done in the organization. So they're comfortable in the sea of foresight, in the land of organizational politics. There's not too many of them. It's a rare combination. So we say you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince. But once you get them, they can really help you sell your ideas, right? So really valuable partners. The second group are the lemmings. When you start talking about the future, and any organization I've been in, people will sort of pop out of the woodwork and go, cool, right? They're there, right? They've just been hiding. So, you get your little support network, and it's good and you need them, but if you believe that's the organizational mainstream, we all go over the cliff together. Small minority. The vultures. They don't like foresight, they don't like change, and they probably don't like you. In my first go-around, I was really, I wanted everybody to love me, and I tried to convert the vultures, and what I learned is the best thing you can do is avoid. Circle around, try to avoid. And then that leaves us the rats, the vast majority of organizations. And don't snicker about rats. I have a pet rat, Zoe. Sweetest, most lovable pet I have ever had. Rats are really good. There's not a bad thing, right? And they're really good diagnostics, because if you present a future idea, if it's a good one, the rats will smell the cheese of that idea and come running. If it's a bad idea, the rats are the first one off the sinking ship. So most of the time when you're introducing new ideas, you're trying to appeal to these fairly neutral diagnostic rats. So a couple of the lessons I learned from trying to get these ideas across an organization. Number 1, the first idea was good ideas don't necessarily sell themselves. So you've got to get into the muck, you've got to get into the politics and persuade and sell, and it's not enough to just have the big idea, you've got to get in there and sell it. And the second was you can't be too worried about credit. It reminds me of a story when I was in the late 1990s working at Kellogg's. We had a project that identified natural foods as a new opportunity area. So we were going around the company after we finished the project, trying to sell it, knocking on doors, and nobody's really buying it. Finally, we got someone who said, yeah, that seems like a pretty good idea. Come to this meeting next week. So we go to the meeting, right? And all the suits are there. It's a suits meeting. We're like, wow, we've made it, right? And they kind of gave us a little pat in the head and a cookie and said, run along now, we'll take it from here. And that's okay, right? I mean, we were sort of left out of the loop, but that's all right, because once they took the idea, we knew that it was on its way. So we don't worry too much about who gets the credit, as long as our boss knows, right? Okay, so after my 10-year bid inside I did my 10 years inside, I went back to consulting, and one of the cool projects we did was the future of youth happiness for MTV. And the reason I call it the public one of the challenges we have is most of our work is done for clients, and they don't want to talk about it publicly. So people say, well, what have you done? And so we can kind of talk in these vague general terms about things, but we can't really be specific. But in this case, MTV wanted the world to know, and their advertisers, the world and advertisers, that they had their fingers on the pulse of America's youth. They knew what was happening, and they wanted to spread the word. So you can actually find the study is still on their site. One of the cool things about it, we did our sort of standard forecasting thing. We had 13 forecasts about youth happiness, age 12 to 24. But we also got to go around the country and talk to them. Right, so we met them at Starbucks, and we'd pump them up with caffeine and get them yakking about the future. And so we had one of these great moments where someone said, a little girl says, well, I've never met my best friend. We're like, what? Come again? And what she was telling us was her best friend was a virtual friend who they'd never met face to face. It was like, ooh, right? And then we started asking other kids about that, and it was the whole digital native thing where that quote, I think, captured that idea that, the digital natives make little or no distinction between the virtual and the real world. It's all the same to them. It's like, and it's nice to, when it was just one of those great aha moments in the course of doing a study. But as I mentioned, the consulting companies are small. There's not that many of them. And then inside organizations, a lot of us are either individual futurists, lone wolves, or we have little small packs, right? So it's a lonely thing. And we were getting a bunch of us who were doing that work, talking to one another, going, we wish we had a place where we could just talk professional future stuff, right? So after like 5 or 10 years of complaining about it, we finally did something, and we formed the Association of Professional Futurists. And just last summer, we had our 10-year anniversary. We're not sure if we're a profession yet, but we know that we're at least heading in that direction. And like one of the cool things we did, last year we had a virtual gathering. And since we're a global organization, it was a 24-hour meeting where basically we had 3 shifts where it started out in Australia and then Europe and then the US. And we had a 24-hour meeting where we shifted across time zones. And it's just so great to have that sort of professional collegiality available. And then the professional future story comes full circle where I'm now back teaching in the University of Houston Future Studies program. And one of the things that we've tried to do in the last couple of years is kind of put together, what have we learned about doing this work? So the Thinking About the Future book is kind of like how-to. If you wanted to do a strategic planning activity, A to Z, it's kind of the recipe book. The Teaching About the Future book is where we basically put the whole curriculum in a book. And we want to steal this book, right? We want people to steal those ideas and start teaching the future, right? Because right now there's 16 graduate programs in the globe, right? In the whole world, and there are hundreds of individual courses, but it's not a lot, right? It's not a lot. And then K through 12, it's even worse. There's hardly any, very little future thinking going on in K through 12. And, so our goal is like foresight, the study of the future, is as common as history, the study of the past. We got a long way to go. And one of the things I wanted to close on is, I've talked a lot about professional futurists, but our most important allies, we call them the futurizers. And I think, I'm going to suspect many of you in the room could fit that bill. And those are the people who hear a talk like this or read an article. And they go back to their organization and go like, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we thinking about where are we going? And start raising those questions. And in my experience, once somebody raises those questions, it's like a virus, right? It starts, then someone else asks the question, and then someone else asks the question, and pretty soon someone's going to give the answer, right? So to me, I think the futurists and the futurizers need to work together. And our goal is that, that will lead to some better thinking about the future. So thank you very much for that.